English philosopher Thomas Hobbes once said that without rules, the life of man would be nasty, brutish, and short. Hobbes and Camus would fundamentally disagree on the root of human nature when Camus argues that morality, the basis of integrity, is some kind of natural pre-political instinct when he says that integrity has no need of rules. I contend instead that morality, and therefore integrity, is a social construct produced by state and social institutions. First, let's delve into the idea of how social institutions influence integrity, and to do that we first turn to Hobbes and his theories on the state of nature. This is the best model to predict human nature because it gives us a world without state coercion, where men are guided by nothing other than instinct. It is characterized, as Hobbes says, by perfect liberty, and a world where every man has a right to everything, including the life of another. There's no accountability and no deterrence, and ultimately Hobbes says that there is an incentive to kill in self-defense. His conclusion is ultimately that human nature is fundamentally defined by self-interest and this incentive to kill, and not by morality. But why is this important? This is important because we almost universally agree that killing is immoral, so this incentive to kill and morality, therefore, cannot exist at the same time. Or in other words, the state of nature, a world without rules, and morality cannot exist at the same time. In order to ensure morality, we have to get rid of the incentive to kill. And the only way to do that is to have accountability and a reasonable expectation for safety. And the only way to reasonably guarantee those two things is to have a state. But even if you disagree with this logic, without the state, morality is still impossible to define and is therefore functionally non-existent along with integrity. This is because most moral decisions are based on the weighing of complex, competing moral claims to rights, and ultimately require the state to define. An example of this would be something like the right to life versus the right to self-defense. These instances are tremendously complicated and nuanced, and ultimately have multiple parties that all have legitimate moral claims to rights, and ultimately require a sort of weighing mechanism, which is ultimately arbitrary for moral standards because they lack a hierarchy or weighing mechanism. They only tell us what is right or wrong. They don't tell us what to do when multiple people have a legitimate moral claim to something. The state is therefore used to weigh these rights of individuals and make a just decision by defining morality. That is something that just simply cannot happen without the state. However, it is reasonable to assume that when Camus said integrity has no need of rules, that he didn't actually mean it could function in a world with no rules at all. But even if you relax this assumption to include only instances outside of the reach of the law, Camus' claim is still theoretically and empirically disproven by the notion that society actually strictly governs itself when the state cannot. In order to explain this argument, I look to Émile Durkheim, the father of modern sociology, who theorizes that there are unwritten laws that are capable of working as a coercive social constraint. He calls these social facts. Social facts are external, meaning they're not necessarily the moral standards of any particular individual, and they're also coercive via some kind of social pressure. He ultimately theorizes that these social facts mandate what is right or wrong, where the state is incapable of doing so. And a few examples of these things that are governed by social facts are things like turning in a lost wallet, holding a door open, or picking up books when someone drops them on the street. Ultimately, this theory shows that integrity is more about social pressure rather than some kind of natural intuitive consciousness. And ultimately, this theory is empirically proven by sociological surveys, particularly two from Penn State University and the University of Michigan. They show that 85% believe they would help someone in need if they had no other choice. However, that number shrinks to 30% that believe they would help someone if they were presented with a justifiable reason not to, or did not have any sort of social pressure that is pushing them to help that person. This alarmingly shows that Durkheim's theory is correct. But even in addition, while 96% of respondents said that they or a colleague have been a victim of street harassment, only 20% indicate that they have or would speak out against it. Ultimately, what does this tell us? It tells us first that following the crowd or avoiding change and conflict is more indicative of human nature than something like morality or integrity. And it also tells us that people only show integrity when they're coerced to do so by a government or some kind of societal institution, which ultimately leads to my conclusion that morality and integrity are the product of a social construct rather than a natural human instinct. right. Now, while this argument might seem a bit pessimistic, it is fundamentally a more accurate view of reality than the one given by Camus. While the importance of morality and integrity is undeniable, the reality is that it simply doesn't exist without state and societal coercion. To believe anything else simply defies logic, or as Hobbes would say, not believing in authority is like not believing in gravity. Thank you.